Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Paranormal Paradigm podcast with your hosts Ben Kelly
and Kieran Woodhouse.
So on today's podcast we are going to be speaking with David Young to discuss the Rendlesham Forest Incident, which is a UFO case commonly known as the Britain's version of Roswell.
Yes.
Which happened back in 1980.
Yep, December 1980, yep.
Yeah, so this should be quite interesting.
It should be. I mean, David's going to talk us a bit through the incident. You know, obviously David wasn't there himself, but he'll talk through what happened and the commonly accepted version of what happened.
Yeah.
And he will also discuss the criticisms and the scepticism about certain people's accounts.
Quite a bit of controversy around this subject.
Yeah, and the split that's occurred. And you know, the accusations of fraud and lying and all that stuff. And, you know, I feel like it's important that you guys listen to this, because this is what happens in these subjects. It's what happens in these fields. It happens in the field of paranormal investigation. You have these divisions between groups, between speakers, between, let's say, big egos, and you also have it in the same in the UFO field. So, you know, not everything's as rosy as it might appear when you go to conventions and you go to watch people talk. You know, behind the scenes, there's a lot of internal politics that go on. Also, if you listen to this and you heard Ben introduce it as episode 5 and you're now frantically looking for episode 4 because you can't find it and you think you've missed one, we did upload it. It was bad. Yeah,
for some reason the audio when we did the interview was all corrupted. It would not render out when I was trying to edit everything, and we had to just put it in the bin, basically.
Yeah,
which is a shame, because it was a good episode.
Yeah, I mean, we took it to the vets and they put it to sleep.
Yeah,
it was it was a shame, because it was great, and we had it up until 30 minutes, and the last half hour of the interview with Melissa cut out, and then it came back in. The audio did for the outro. So I don't know what happened. Ben's the tech guy, and if he tells me he doesn't know what's happened, you know, I believe him.
Yeah, I mean, I tried everything I could, and nothing would seem to save it.
Yeah, I mean, so we've spoken to Melissa about this, and she, you know, she understands. She has these issues as well. So at a later date, we will re-record with Melissa. Yeah, we'll talk about the green ghost, because it was a very interesting subject, and we might try and delve into a little bit more.
Yeah.
Varying subjects as well with Melissa. So we do apologise. If anybody, I don't know, if you're that interested and you'd like to hear the raw version of it, let us know, and I'm sure Ben could try and send something over.
Yeah, there might be able to be something salvageable out of it. So.
Maybe, but we're not going to upload it. So if you'd like that, just let us know, and we'll send it to you on the side. Free little gift. But yeah, so apologies about that, but I feel like it was doomed from the start, actually. You know, we had
audio issues
at the start.
You know, Melissa couldn't really hear us that well.
No, we record in my back room, which is kind of like a conservatory. Yeah. It started raining, so you could hear the rain on the Perspex roof. So there were a few bangs going on that we couldn't control. So we probably should have read the signs there and there.
Yeah.
So it's probably a good thing. So we'll jump in now, I guess.
I mean, this is, you know, obviously based on UFOs, which is more your sort of.
It's more my field,
of, you know, expertise and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's
I'm looking forward to it, and I'm really interested to see what happened.
Yeah, I mean, it should be good. I hope David goes into detail and really tells us, you know, his kind of version of events. Like I say, he wasn't there, but he's done so much research into it. I bet he feels like he was there. Please enjoy, and here's the interview with David. And we're welcoming David to the show. Hi, David.
Hi, Kieran and Ben.
Hiya.
You doing okay, David?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Thank you for the invite onto the show. Makes a change to come on somebody else's show for a little while, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's to be honest, it's a pleasure. I mean, we're both interested in the UFO field, and although we do predominantly ghosts, it's always nice to branch out into different areas, and because some of our listeners, I find if you're into one thing, you're probably into the other as well.
Yeah.
So it'll be a nice little treat for them. So as I mentioned in the intro, you're going to be talking about the Rendlesham Forest Incident, or the RFI as it has become known. So yeah, I mean, of course, you've got your own interests in the field as well. So do you want to tell us how you got interested in the field and the RFI?
Yeah, I can. I mean, probably it's probably best to go right back to when I was. Well, I'm going to go right back to when I was a baby. Actually, I was a young kid. My earliest supernatural experience, if you like, I was actually standing in my crib. I lived in London, basically. I grew up in London, and I must have been probably just about on the cusps of learning to talk, and but I do remember standing in my crib. And I was watching. I saw a purple mist come into the room, swirled around the room, and I remember screaming to my father, "Look at look! I mean, in the baby talk, I guess. Look at that! Look at that!" And because he came running into the room and he couldn't see it. And
so it wasn't solid at all. It was just like a fog.
Well, it was actually like a purple mist that swirled around the room, and then basically when I called my father and I was screaming, I mean, I didn't know. The thing is, you see, I was too young to know what ghosts or anything were. Yeah. So I really don't know, but it was something that always stuck with me. And I remember my father's dead now. He's been dead sort of like 10, 12 years now. But I sort of brought it up to him sometime, sort of years ago. And he said, yeah, I do remember that you screaming and this purple mist. What it actually was, I don't know. I mean, someone's told me that when you're like a young child, you do have your mind's more open to supernatural things and ghosts and And I did find out later that the house we were living in, I mean, I didn't know it at the time. I was too young. But the lady downstairs, we used to rent the upper part of the house, and the lady downstairs rented it to us, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
And she had died around about that time. So,
okay.
And whether it was some sort of a spiritual, visit or something, or I don't know what it was, but.
So your dad never saw it?
No, my father couldn't see this purple mist, but I could still see it when he was in the room, but I could still, and I remember seeing it go, and it swirled back out the door again. So that was kind of my earliest memory of anything sort of supernatural. And and of course at the time I didn't think of it as being supernatural.
No.
It wasn't a dream. Well, I don't think it was a dream or anything, because it was just it was something that stuck with me all that time, And I guess the next thing that came along was I was about 8 or 9 living in London still. Now we're going to go on to like the UFO field now. I was actually sitting on my steps looking up at the stars.
Right.
And we're talking about 1958, 59-ish. I was probably about 8 or 9. And I remember watching a star move and stop and move and stop. And I watched it for quite a while. It was sort of coming down in a downward motion. And it was on my left side. And now it was back then I just thought, it's a star moving. But then later on, when I sort of realised, well, stars don't do that. Stars don't act that way, And that was probably when I was about 15, 16. I thought, well, what the hell was that I was watching?
Okay.
So, and then my next experience was about 1960. I think it was 67. I was actually coming home from there's another UFO one, this is. I was coming home from my girlfriend's at the time, which she ended up as my wife, which was a big mistake. That's another story. I was coming home from a girlfriend's one particular night, and I was watching an oval orange object going across the sky. And it seemed quite a large oval orange object going across the sky, very silent. I was watching, and it wasn't like a bright light. It was like an incandescent light, and it wasn't a Chinese lantern or anything like that. It was big and it was pulsating,
How high would you say it was?
Sorry, how high? I don't know how high because I don't know how big it was or anything.
Right.
But
yeah.
I can only assume it was about the height of a normal aeroplane type height,
Okay, yeah.
Well, it could have been 1,000 miles out, if it was a massive thing. But I don't know. Without sort of having any idea of the size of it, it's hard to tell. But I did watch it for quite a while, for probably a good 10 minutes going across the sky. So, I don't know what that was. Strangely, funny enough, I've just had on my recent show, which is not coming out until next week, I've just had a man named Terry Ray on. Now, he wrote a book about the orange orb invasions. So you might like to catch up with that later on, because I actually went out and to try and find if there was a book about orange orbs.
Right.
Well, I was looking for oval objects, but it came out as orange orbs.
Yeah.
But on the cover of the book, it actually looks like there's I think there's 6 of these things in a V-shaped triangle shape. But I only saw the one when I saw my one. But like it's an artist impression of these things, you know.
Yeah.
But that was kind of my, I suppose, getting an interest in UFOs. And then I think it was around about 66, 67 when things like Chariots of the Gods started coming out. Eric von Däniken, which really kicked my interest off. You know, I mean, I think I read that book about 3 times at Chariots of the Gods because I think they serialised it in the newspaper at the time as well.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. I mean, for our listeners that don't know who Eric von Däniken is, he's basically the pioneer of the ancient astronaut theory and the ancient alien programs that's on TV now. And it's a fantastic book. So I recommend Chariots of the Gods, definitely.
Yeah, I know. And the amazing thing is, I mean, I don't know if you went to Awakening last year.
I did, yeah. I was there, yeah.
But, Eric von Däniken was actually staying in my hotel, the same hotel I was in. The Manchester football one. I think it was a football hotel or something. And funny enough, as I walked in to check in, Eric von Däniken was sitting over on the chair. Now, I'd already met Eric von Däniken a couple of times before because I had to have a little short meeting with him for the Haunted Skies book on behalf of John Hanson.
Right.
Because he wanted to get a little saying, a little bit added to the back of the book from Eric von Däniken. So, and as I walked out, I said, "Oh, it's Eric von Däniken, Mr. von Däniken." He said, I said, "I'm David Young." He said, "I remember you." Now that blew my mind, you know, the fact that Eric von Däniken says, "I remember you," you know, that's like one of those sort of agog moments, you know.
Yeah, very surreal.
But anyway, I've sort of spoken to him a few times since, and funny enough, at the Awakening thing, I was actually sitting in the bar drinking with Eric von Däniken. Well, drinking, I don't drink that much, but having a drink with Nick Pope, Eric von Däniken, and Mike Barra.
I love Mike Barra. He did such a great presentation on the moon hoax this year.
Yes.
I don't know if you were there, but I mean, I went in there with the mindset of I don't think we went to the moon, and he gave an interesting presentation that we did. And it certainly made me go away and think about it. I mean, I certainly do think we do. Well, I do.
I'm quite positive we went to the moon. I mean, I was in the electronics business from 66 onwards, and I know the sort of stuff we were making back then, and some of the things that I was involved in for the like the electronics, and you know some of the stuff that we were making, micro electronics, even back then in 66, you'd be amazed. So I'm pretty positive we did go to the moon, and we did have the technology, and as they say, because I hear a lot of things where we didn't have the technology, but it was pretty basic, and I know our home computers are a lot more powerful than the computers they had back then.
But,
you know, but what you got to remember is most of the control was actually back on Earth anyway. You know, it's look at the computer bases and things in the command centers. It was all, it was all from that, and really they only needed the basic. I mean, a lot of it was done manual anyway.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, like I say, it's
a whole another different subject, isn't it?
It is a different podcast show. I mean, if anyone's interested, if they do want to try and find Mike Barra's presentation on the moon hoax, whether we did or didn't go, it's quite an interesting presentation.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, it's funny. I thought one of my shows just recently, I had Andrew Johnson on. Now he's a good friend of mine as well. Well, I call him a good friend. I think he thinks of me as a friend too.
Yeah.
But he's a bit doubtful about the moon landings and everything, and that's kind of one of the things that we kind of disagree on. But it's all done friendly, and
it's just debate, isn't it? Because the thing is, if you talk to someone, just because they don't share your opinion, it doesn't mean you can fall out with them.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you could learn something yourself from what they say.
I mean, it's not to say. I mean, I do think that NASA cover up a lot of stuff. I mean, I do believe they hid a lot of stuff and what was going on. I mean, I've actually heard stories that when they did the first moon landing on Apollo 11 was actually they actually saw an alien spaceship. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but. It certainly makes you think.
It does. And again, Mike Barra went into some detail with that and what they possibly found on the moon. It's certainly an interesting thought. I mean, it's divided the the field for years and years, and it will continue to divide the field. But I think, I mean, if we just kind of, move on to how you got into the RFI, because I know we will talk a lot about division within the field later on in the show. Just tell us a little bit about how you actually got involved with the Rendlesham Forest itself.
Well, I didn't actually get involved until probably 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I've got to give you a bit of basic knowledge about me, really.
Okay, please, yeah.
I was like everybody else, and I'd heard about the Rendlesham Forest Incident years ago, reading books like Left at Eastgate, which we'll go into a little bit later.
Yeah.
And also knowing the characters like Colonel Holt, the Holt memorandum. You hear John Burrows and Jim Penniston, and hearing all the characters that were involved in the Rendlesham Forest Incident. Yeah. Now, I mean, I was living in London, I lived in Essex, and working. I didn't get a chance to go to many conferences because I was often working all the time. Now, in 2013, I took early retirement basically, and I ended up moving to Suffolk with a new partner, new wife, and everything. Yeah. And we came to live in Suffolk, as I just said. And I found out that after we'd been here for a little while that I was living quite near to Rendlesham Forest.
Right.
Now, strangely, there was a conference that was arranged. I believe at that time it was John Burrows, and I think there was Richard Dolan came over. Okay. And unfortunately, you'll see a bit more about this. Gary Heseltine and Larry Warren were there.
Okay.
Now, that was kind of the first time I got to see any conferences about the Rendlesham Forest Incident, basically. And that was it was 2014, I believe that was. It's like about a year after I've been living here. So I went to that, and all well and good. I got my book signed for Richard Dolan. I heard John Burrows talk about getting his injury allowance from the Air Force and everything. Heard some spiel from Gary Heseltine and Larry Warren about the letter that supposedly had been sent home. Come away from that thinking no more about it and thinking, okay, that was interesting. And then it was a year later, in 2015, when John Henson, who writes the Haunted Skies books, had a conference, and it was Colonel Holt coming to Rendlesham, to Woodbridge, basically. Okay. And of course, at that time, I knew about the Larry Warren story. I was quite, I thought it was all true at the time, as you do. And I went to. I was very, very pleased. I was quite, because living just down the road to Woodbridge, I'm sort of like 15 minutes away.
Yeah.
I was quite pleased to go and see actually meet Colonel Holt and see the conference, and it just cost me 20 quid for the night. But the reason I'm saying all this is because there was quite a lot of complaints about Colonel Holt's presentation at that time, because he did a lot of criticism of Larry Warren, saying he wasn't there and everything. And of course, at that time, Larry Warren had quite a lot of support from people, including myself.
Although Larry Warren is the guy that co-wrote the book Left at Eastgate.
Left at Eastgate with Peter Robbins, yeah. I'll tell you a bit more about that as we go along, because that was actually removed from by the publishers about a year and a half ago. Okay. Because of proven lies by Larry Warren, but I'll mention a bit more about that later. So I went to see this presentation from Colonel Holt, and I thought it was great. I mean, in actual fact, I did actually say to him at the time, I think I said something like, because I think a few people were mentioning, well, how did you, why are you having a go at Larry Warren and everything? And a few people thought it was a bit unfair. But of course, we all know now that actually what he was saying was actually true, There was Peter Robbins actually wrote a book called Holt at Woodbridge, just on the back of that conference, because of the criticisms that Holt had made of the book Left at Eastgate and Larry Warren and everything. And of course, that was floating around for a couple of years. Everyone thinking, like I said, I was very pleased to meet Colonel Holt anyway, whatever the thing, because he was there. He was a major witness and wrote the memorandum and everything. So that was the end of that. Now, the reason I got very close with John Henson. We became friends because what happened at the conference, somebody stole a picture off of the front of the thing, one of John's pictures, and got Colonel Holt to sign it. Now, that person just happened to be sitting next to me in the audience.
Right.
This is quite a convoluted story because it tells you it actually is important how I actually got to be involved in everything. This person showed me this picture of this picture that it got signed, and I said, "Oh, where did you get that from?" And he said, "Oh, down the front." And I thought, "Oh, perhaps they handed them out and he got them signed." Right.
Yeah.
Now, this person's name was Andrew Ross.
Right.
Now, as it happens, in that audience there was 2 Andrew Rosses. Right.
Right.
So John Henson found out that it was an Andrew Ross that pinched his picture, but he was accusing the wrong Andrew Ross. There was another Andrew Ross
comedy film.
I think he showed a picture on Facebook or something of Andrew Ross who was looking, who said, "This is the bloke who pinched my picture," and I said, "No, that's not him." I said, the man that pinched your picture was sitting next to me and he showed it to me. So anyway, it kind of got on a bit like that, and we started talking a lot on the phone, and John was phoning me up quite a bit, and we just became friends basically from then on. Okay. And Andrew Ross also became a friend, the real, the one that hadn't pinched the picture, because he said thank you for defending me and everything. So that was that. Yeah, it was a bit of a comedy really, but. And of course, because there was a lot of people complaining about Colonel Holt's presentation and everything, and John, I said, well, I can understand why they were complaining, John. I mean, probably people spent quite a bit of money coming there, and I mean, to me, I was great because I lived down the road. It cost me 20 quid.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of how I got close with John. Now, John, as you know, has written, or do you know? I mean, he wrote a book. He wrote a book with Colonel Holt called The Holt Perspective.
Yes, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Right. So he was sort of involved with that, and this was on the back of that conference. Basically, I think they must have arranged it from there on. So at that point, I'd only met Colonel Holt to say hello to and everything, and that was that. But anyway, I kind of got quite close to John, and he actually calls me his I don't know, what do you call it, PR man or something, really. Oh. And this is how I ended up meeting Eric von Däniken.
Okay. Yeah.
Because he asked me, because John couldn't make it to go and meet him at the Awakening conference. He'd arranged an appointment to speak to him. So he asked me if I would do it, and I said, "Yeah, of course I will, John." Although I'd already seen Eric von Däniken at his Eric von Däniken Legacy Night in London. Yeah. I'd already sort of seen him from a distance, had my book signed and everything. So that was kind of the second time I was meeting him. I'm sorry if I'm rambling on a bit. Stop me if you think I'm rambling.
No, it's fine.
It's kind of
quite nice.
It's kind of a big.
It's a huge field. I mean, again, for the listeners, I've heard it described as the British Roswell, basically, and it's something that we could talk about for hours and hours, and Absolutely. Still, without even retreading old ground, really. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you actually just want to tell our listeners a little bit about the actual incident. So
sure,
what it was that supposedly happened on that night. I mean, it was over 3 nights, 1980.
Yeah, I'm glad you stopped me from rambling because I was going on a bit. But basically, what happened, I'll just cut it short there. Basically, I've become a good friend. Colonel Holt has become a good friend of mine on the back of a lot of that, and he's actually stayed in my home and all that. So that's kind of where I was leading to, but we don't need to go into all that. But what I'll do, I'll just go into, it was December 1980. Okay. It was Christmas time. It was actually Boxing Night when lights were seen in the forest. Now, it was John Burrows. I think he put a report in to say there was some sort of lights in the forest, and they were sent out to investigate. Cabanasag, I think, was the one that he went out with. But Jim Penniston, who was in charge that night of the security forces, because Jim Penniston was a staff sergeant, so he was actually the one in charge of. I think he was actually in charge of the whole base almost on that night, as far as the sort of security went.
Yeah.
but anyway, Jim Penniston met John Burrows and Cabansag up at Eastgate, and they drove out to where these lights were. All of them they actually thought it was going to be a downed plane. Actually,
yeah.
They had to leave their weapons at the gate, of course, because they were actually on UK territory. Once you're out of that gate, you're in Rendlesham Forest, which is UK territory. So, which set up another little bit of a problem when the report was going in, because the base is US. Well, although they were it was a UK base from the RAF, it was actually obviously being used by the US. So, but obviously the forest is UK territory. So,
of course, yeah.
So they were going into the UK territory to look at a light that they saw in the forest. Now, as you know, or your listeners may not know, but Bentwaters and Woodbridge were twin bases, and it was a nuclear base. Now, nobody really knows exactly what they kept there, but I have heard that they had parts of nuclear weapons and things there, and that was the first response place where the A-10s, I think they had other aircraft as well at the time, that would be the first response for any sort of aggression by Russia, basically. That would be the first base out. It was the height of the Cold War as well, 1980.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So seeing things landing in the woods, it's sort of got everyone's heckles up, really. Anyway, so they went out to see what these lights were in the woods. They followed these lights, and I think Cabansag was left with the Jeep, although there's a bit of a story that I think Burrows says that they were all together, but Jim says that they weren't. He'd asked Cabansag there to stay with the Jeep or the vehicle. I'm not sure if it was a Jeep. I think there's a bit of question about that as well.
Okay.
But anyway, John Burrows and Jim Penniston saw this craft that had landed. Now, in early descriptions, John Burrows does actually describe a craft, and he describes a white light with something that was within it. His later descriptions, he says he just saw lights. So how you take his story is a bit sort of here and there, really, because his story has changed a bit.
Yeah.
Jim Penniston, his story has basically stayed much the same. He says that John Burrows basically blacked out at some point, and he was standing there sort of staring at this thing, but not sort of seeing it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Jim actually walked up to this thing, and he actually felt it, and it was like he describes it as glass-like, like black glass.
Okay.
And there were symbols on it. He walked around it a few times, and he ran his hands over these symbols, and on one of them there was a big flash, and he thought the thing was going to explode. So it's kind of and I do believe they both hit the ground at some point as well. But John Burrows doesn't remember a lot of that, but Jim does.
And is Jim the guy that has come out with the binary
yes,
message?
He's just released a book actually called the Rendlesham Enigma, which is
Right.
very, very, very good. Very good book. It's very, very detailed. Funny enough, when Colonel Holt was here a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago, he was going through my copy, which had just arrived.
Yeah.
And basically, I let him have it, and I had to order a new one. So he's taking it over him. So because obviously there's quite a lot about him in it,
Yeah.
There's a few things he says, or don't like that, or not so sure about that. There's few things in there which he disagrees with, which if you listen to my show, which he's just been on, he sort of does go into a little bit. But anyway, right, where was I? Oh yeah, the craft. Yeah, Jim. They came away basically from this craft. Basically, the thing that took off and went up into the air, and they tried to follow it through the trees and out into the field, and it went across over towards Alford Ness Way, where at one point John Burrows was actually chasing the lighthouse, and this is where the lighthouse story comes into it.
Yes, I've heard about this.
Because they, and Jim was saying, no, that's not. It's not that. That's you can see the lighthouse flashing now, because the craft went sort of that way, and And I think it was kind of mentioned to there was a local woodsman or something about the lighthouse, and I think that's where that story first came from John Burrows himself, as I understand it.
Right. Okay.
So anyway, they obviously went back into the base and they made a report out. They didn't know quite. Jim says he didn't know quite how to make this report out because he said it was going to damage his career in the Air Force. I think they all thought that really, because you start in UFOs and things. But apparently John Burrows was a bit excited. Kept on saying about UFOs and. But anyway, so the report was made. It was made in the blotters, and the next morning when Colonel Holt came in, into the office basically, he picked up the blotters, which what they called the blotters, and everyone was laughing. Apparently, they said, "Oh, Burrows and Penniston were out chasing UFOs last night," and he looked at them, what, as if to say, "Are you kidding?" Sort of thing.
It doesn't sound very good, does it?
So that was kind of that. And then we come to now there's a bit of uncertainty about the second night. I always wonder if it was the second night or if it was a second incident on the same night.
Right.
But I think I'm told it's the second night. So we're talking about the 27th now.
Okay.
When apparently there was a light seen again at the East Gate, and it was Laurie Barron. I can't remember her name now. Laurie Barron, I think it was. Saw these. Well, apparently. A light entered her vehicle and made her drop her weapon and stuff. But I've heard that there's a conflicting story about that, so I can't really go. The second night is not really spoken about too much. Something happened. Something occurred.
It's like that awkward second album that that bands don't talk about.
Something occurred, but it's not quite obvious or talked about that much that anyone knows exactly what happened. Okay. There was, but of course, the next one was the big night. Well, after the first night, the big night was the third night when I think Colonel Holt was at the party, Christmas party, with a few officers and whatever, and I think it was Bobby Ball came in. One of the other officers anyway came in and told him it's back. So went up to Colonel Holt and said it's back, and they said what's back? He said the UFO's back. And they sort of looked at it and said, "Oh, come on, see one of these sort of things." It's like, "You kidding me?" They think it was a joke, kind of thing. Yeah. And anyway, to cut a long story short, Holt was sent out with a small team to go out and basically put this story to bed, kind of thing. Well, of course, when they went out into the woods with Colonel Holt had his team. There's Adrian Bustinza was with Colonel Holt all the time. Now the name Bustinza is going to be important as far as the book Left at Eastgate goes, right? So that's I mentioned it. Bustinza was with Holt all the time, and you can hear him on because Holt took a tape recorder, which he always took anywhere, to record notes rather than sort of write them down, just sort of a little dictaphone machine. So he took that and he got asked somebody else to take a Geiger counter for whatever reason, and they went into the woods to find out what the hell all his lights were again. Now, so they're following his lights in the woods. It flew low, and it actually damaged a couple of the tops of the trees. Eventually, they followed it out, and it went right across what they call Capel Green, which is actually Capel St Andrew, which is the farmer's field, towards Capel Green. Now, Capel Green is across the road from Capel St Andrew, which was mistakenly called Capel Green by in Left at Eastgate. But
and isn't this the title of an upcoming film?
Yes, another story. Okay, I'll a bit more about that later. But I think what's kind of been accepted now, I think the whole area is called Capel Green to make it easy, but in actual fact it's Capel St Andrew where the farmer's field is. Right. Anyway, Colonel Holt and his team, they followed these lights in the sky. Nothing landed on Capel Green, as in left at Eastgate and aliens and everything. It was nothing like that. They followed these lights out and across, basically going out to sea again. I think they actually followed them right across the field, the farmer's field, which is called Capel St Andrew, not towards Capel Green, which is over the road. Because Colonel Holt took us out there last year, and basically it just told us where we follow those lights out to sea, basically. And of course, the lighthouse is to the right of that. So he says you couldn't see. At that time, you couldn't see the lighthouse, and also you only see green and red lights from sea, not from the land. You'd only see a white light from the land because it had a shade on it.
Yeah.
So they knew that, but besides that, they knew what the lighthouse looked like anyway. I mean, otherwise you'd have had UFO reports every night, wouldn't you? If it was a lighthouse, I mean, that's what I've always said. It's why suddenly the lighthouse turns into UFOs when it's always been. Would have had reports like that, a lot of times before.
Yeah, and if they're based there, they obviously know the land, the lie of the land that's around them, and they'd know what the lighthouse was and where it was and how it looked, and they'd know anything that was different to a lighthouse.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've cut it kind of short because you could actually go, there's so many facts and figures and things involved in this. But anyway, basically, they got cold and wet and went back to the base. And Colonel Holt was thinking to himself, how the hell am I going to report this? Because he looked on it as a danger to his career again.
Yeah.
Actually, he wasn't a colonel at the time. He was a lieutenant colonel. Right. So we get that right. He became a colonel later.
So it didn't damage his career that
well,
much?
It did. He thinks it still damaged his career to a certain extent, yeah.
Okay.
Although he ended up working in the Pentagon later.
So it wasn't that bad then. He did okay.
No. But he had top secret clearance, yeah, and so did Jim Penniston. I think they were they were two of 9 people only on the base that had absolute top, over the top security clearance.
Yeah.
That's just a sideline thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, Colonel Holt had to write up about it, and he wrote a memo because he was told, well, you need to write something down for a report for the UK government. So that Holt memo was written out, sent to the UK government, and that was the end of it as far as Holt was, thought.
Yeah.
So it was never meant to see the light of day from a public point of view. I think it was probably a year or so later. There was, as you know, Brenda Butler, Dot Street, and Jenny Randalls wrote a book called Sky Crash.
Okay, yeah.
They were the original investigators because they'd heard something happened on the base about a UFO, and they worked for they worked for the local Bufora UFO magazine.
Yeah.
Investigation committee, do you call it? I don't know, but I think Dot Street was one of the investigators. Anyway, Dot lived in Suffolk at the same time, and Brenda and they started looking into it. They apparently an airman had come to them. He was given the name Steve Roberts, and telling them about a UFO and aliens landing.
Right. Okay.
This is where the alien story comes from.
Right, which of course was never mentioned in the Colonel Holt report that he'd written.
Yeah, no, of course. This was a separate thing, and this is why the story eventually started coming out about a UFO. I think that the News of the World picked up on the story. There was a not Larry Warren, another. Notes. I can't think that. There was an American investigation began, and they started looking into the whole story of what happened. And they were talking to Brenda Butler. Now, what had happened, a story ended up in Omni magazine about this UFO, which I think Dot Street had written. And this is where Larry Warren appeared into the story. He apparently picked up this story from the Omni magazine. Right. And he started thinking, I need to get in on this. This is
okay.
because he was on the base at the time.
So I'll just kind of interject here. So with again for our listeners, so that's the incident, and since the incident, as David has just mentioned there is a guy called Larry Warren, and Larry Warren co-wrote the book Left at East Gate with Peter Robbins. Is that right?
That was in 1993, I think they wrote
1993, and it was about how his supposed, I guess, description of what happened over those 3 nights, and it's really since he came on the scene that there's been opposing, I guess you'd say, opposing views of what actually happened.
Well, actually, not so much when he came on the scene. I think he got away with it for a good few years. Everyone thinking, okay, he was on the base and he was involved in it. Colonel Holt has kind of always said that he wasn't involved in it, although he accepted at some point that he may well have been, because there was a few people out in the field from the base, but from early on, Colonel Holt began to think, well, no, this is not right, because he actually, let's put it like this. Larry Warren was in the Air Force for less than 10 months, right, altogether. Right. I think they tried to give the impression that he was in for longer, but in fact, he was in for less than 10 months. Now, he'd only just completed his basic training from coming in from Texas. I think it was Texas. His basic training was, and he'd just been on the base, basically a couple of days before the incident happened.
Right. Okay.
Well, I say a couple of days, maybe a week or still a couple of weeks before the incident happened, and he's got several different stories as to where he was on the 2 days running up before his supposed third day incident.
Right.
Now, this is where it all gets a bit confusing for anyone trying to get into this, from looking at the Larry Warren story and looking at another version of it. Because Larry Warren's book kind of really muddied the waters early on. Obviously, let's go back to the Brenda Butler book. Originally, when Larry Warren surfaced during when it came out in the news of the world, he was given the name Art Wallace. So if you hear the name read the name Art Wallace anywhere, it was actually Larry Warren.
Okay, and why would he have a different name?
Well, they just gave him. He said he didn't want to be known by his own name, but I believe that was actually the newspaper that did that rather than give him his own name, because they thought it might damage his standing in the Air Force or whatever. Yeah. But anyway, it was later on, after he'd left the Air Force or been kicked out, basically. It was, and that's kind of, although he was given a honourable discharge, as they say, it was basically just to get rid of him quick. So I've been told.
Right. Okay.
So I've been told that by basically Jim Penniston and Colonel Holt, because he wasn't. He was on the base on the night, but he was not out in the field because he was on. Basically, I think Jim called it toilet duties, that type of thing. Just
right. Yeah.
Just basically giving him menial jobs until they could get rid of him.
So the people that you mentioned, i.e. Jim Penniston and Colonel Holt and these people who were out there. And they can all kind of account for each other, and they all knew that they were all out there. None of these people.
No, let me correct you. Colonel Holt wasn't involved in the first night. He was only involved in seeing the reports of the first night.
Okay.
But on the third night, John Burrows, who was involved on the first night.
Yeah.
The third night. John Burrows, who was involved in the third night, he was actually off duty on the third night, and actually heard about the UFO that was going on, and he went out to see what was going on again. So, and I think he, at some point, he asked Colonel Holt if he could go and look again as to where he saw the craft land in the woods area. And I think Adrian Bustinza went with him. See, this is where the Adrian Bustinza story became the Larry Warren story, because Larry Warren kind of, Adrian told Larry Warren basically everything that happened that night, and Larry Warren sort of took off and ran with it.
Okay, right. Okay.
And there's been a recent email released in Jim Penniston's book with Adrian Bustinza actually stating that in the email that he told Larry Warren everything. And
Right.
that's kind of where there was a small team of us that started investigating the Larry Warren story about over 3 years ago now, because a lot of things didn't tie up.
Didn't make sense, yeah.
No, a lot of things didn't make sense because, the reason we started that investigation, see, there's one thing needs to know. The reason we started that investigation was I think it was 2016. Peter Robbins came over to the UK, right? Because it was going to be Larry Warren and Peter Robbins doing a talk in Glasgow, or was it Edinburgh? No, it was Glasgow. I flew up to Glasgow because I wanted to meet with Peter Robbins because I'd spoken to him quite a bit on the internet. So he's kind of a friend you haven't met yet.
Yeah, like a pen pal.
And then so of course, when I get out to Glasgow, I found out I've got Larry Warren standing outside the venue where he's supposed to be talking, and he's telling me I've been banned from the conference because I knew Larry basically. By then I'd got to know him and called him a friend basically. Why, I never know, but there you go. Anyway, that's another story. But and I was actually there saying, "Wow, how disgusting! Why is that?" Oh, he's telling me all these cockamamie stories as to why he got banned. And I think the idea that he wanted was for Peter Robbins to actually back out, like to say, like, if you're not going to have Larry in here talking, then I'm not going to talk.
Yeah,
but of course, Peter, being the professional that he is, he went on and did the whole thing on his own. He put in, and of course at that time I'm still thinking, well, this is pretty bad that they banned Larry from talking and all that, But I found out later that Larry Warren knew he was banned before he went up there. So he went up there basically to cause problems, because it was all planned. They had a film set, a camera set up in a hotel room for Larry to actually film an interview to actually be shown at the conference,
Right, okay.
So the fact that he was banned, and I'll tell you the reason he was banned now, because there was things going on that I'd only heard a little bit on the periphery. You may have heard the name Sasha Christie. Sasha was a long time friend of Larry Warren's. She did him a favour. He got kicked out of his home, that he rented because he couldn't pay his rent or something. She did him a favour, let him sleep on her sofa. We hear all sorts of stories now that one or two people they put out that she was a lover of his, but it's not true at all. She had a partner and she did him a favour and just let him sleep on the sofa, which he ruined apparently. I won't tell you how. Actually, I might.
No, it's quite.
It is out there anyway. Anyway, eventually, because of Warren's behaviour, he ended up getting kicked out anyway. He actually moved with them from Leeds when they, I think their home, they had to move out. I think the owner of the home wanted to sell it or something, so it made them sort of homeless. So, well, not homeless, but they had to move on and find another home. So they moved to Liverpool. And believe it or not, Larry Warren moved with them, still sleeping on the sofa. Okay, so anyway, because of Warren's behaviour in the end, there was something big that happened, and he was told to go. He's got to move out, and everything was all fine and friendly. He said, "Yeah, okay, I understand," and all that. There's a couple of I've seen messages. He said where Sashi was saying, "Are you all right?" and everything is, "Are you?" And he's saying, "Yeah, I'm okay, doll," and stuff like that, and. Then there was another message about he was overdosed on blow, which is cocaine, as I understand it. And Dave went out to find him to make sure he was all right, because it sounded like he was dying or killed himself or something. But anyway, that's kind of we're going off in a different story.
Yeah,
they basically cared about him,
Yeah, and then I guess there would have been a lot of people that did. You had people like Peter Robbins who co-wrote the book with him. How did he feel when these allegations started to come out and the truth began to reveal itself? This guy put, I guess, a lot of faith in him.
Let me just finish this Glasgow thing, because we found out I found out. I mean, I was actually having a drink with Peter Robbins and Larry Warren and a couple of other people that evening, and Larry was still telling basically lies about why he'd been barred from the conference. It was only a couple of days after when Alison Dunlop, who had arranged the conference in Glasgow, had actually started putting out the letters as to why Larry Warren had been barred. And it was because he started threatening a woman who was going to ask a question at the conference. And that woman was Sasha Christie. All she was doing was asking questions about, obviously an incriminating question that he didn't want to answer. And he threatened to jump off the stage and put a spine through a windpipe.
Right.
So it was a threat of violence. That's why he was banned. Now, he never said any of that.
No, of course.
To me. And this is when I started to realise, I thought, there's something wrong here. This guy is not legit, not straight,
Yeah, of course.
I, at that point, I started thinking to myself, well, I'm going to back off a bit here because I don't think he's, especially threatening a woman. I mean, it's that's just not on with me at all. But anyway, that's when it was before that all the threats. I mean, so they'd been sending out caring messages to him, and he started making, saying horrible things like, "You better move, bitch," and stuff like this, or messages to that sort of thing. And Sasha was flabbergasted. Why is he suddenly turning nasty? You know?
Yeah.
And I think it's because she knew a lot about him, which he had told her. And
that he didn't want other people to.
That he didn't want coming out.
Yeah.
Well, that was the worst thing to do, because in turning Sasha completely against him, he doesn't know what sort of a tiger he'd unleashed there, because it was kind of where we still are now, because it's still going on. It's got quite vicious, but
I mean it has, and we've spoken about this off air, but it's a shame really, because anyone that's kind of listening to this who's not really into the UFO field, and I know Ben isn't particularly, you see things like this going on, and it
is off point. Yeah, I agree. But I mean, but at the end of the day, whose fault is it? I mean, all we were trying to do was actually get at the truth and release the truth, and make people realise the truth of what was going on. And we got such a lot of evidence that I can't show you anything on the radio, but but there is such a vast amount of evidence. But there's plenty to see on Facebook if you go to Sasha's page and everything, and mine and everything else. But I was just trying to think, where do we go from? Right, okay, so we were at this Glasgow conference. Now, when I came away from that, thinking, oh, okay, well, I'm going to back off a bit from Larry Warren, keep my eye on him. And I told Alison much the same. I said, now you've told the truth. Now you've told me, and I can see what had happened there. Because I was actually criticising Alison for having him banned and all things like that. But it wasn't actually Alison, it was actually the venues. They actually get they took on extra security for £400 and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, when I started realising there's something wrong here, I started talking to Sasha more, because I'd actually been critical of her for giving all these stories out, and I started. She realised that I was actually only interested in the truth, and of course we started getting very I don't know. I think we've become to an understanding, and we kind of started. She started showing me a lot of stuff that was been going on with Warren and everything like that. And then something really happened that brought me really into it. I'll just go through that quickly. I used to go up to the woods quite a lot with Brenda Butler and a few other people. One of these people was a fellow named Chris. I won't say his second name. Well, one night he actually died on the way home. He drove into a tree basically on his way home.
All right.
Because he lived up in Norfolk, and his favourite place was going to the Eastgate. He often used to have a barbecue at the Eastgate. Now, I went to his funeral and everything, but of course his friends in the woods, we decided to have a little memorial at the Eastgate, and we decided to have a little barbecue. Of course, we made it obvious on Facebook, saying anyone that wanted to come, please, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Then I started getting a barrage of abuse from Larry Warren, saying I was insulting his brothers, meaning Air Force.
Yeah, not
buddies.
his actual brother. Yeah,
not his actual brothers. His buddies and all that in the Air Force. And I said, hold on a minute, Larry. I said, this is absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with you. We're doing this because it was his favourite place.
Yeah.
And everyone could see. Then everyone started saying how disgusting it was and all that. And anyway, it kind of got worse from there when he started making threats to me, threats to my life. He threatened my life a couple of times, and that's kind of where I ended up thinking, right, well, I'm with Sasha now. I'm gonna take him out, because that's kind of, that's my personality. Somebody wants to put me right on that side, then that's where I'm going to be. And we ended up, Alison Dunlop, who had arranged that first conference in Glasgow. She joined a little investigation team. And there was another fella, James Francis Welsh, who was in Glasgow. He's a Scotsman. We sort of formed a little investigation group that we were going to investigate all this stuff about Larry Warren, because there was a lot of stuff that didn't tie up, using basically Sasha's original investigation stuff, which she'd already started. So most of it is actually Sasha's, of course, but we did actually start finding out things about memorabilia fraud, Beatles memorabilia fraud, which is proven. There was actually something in a paper. May Pang said something about, so there was some John Lennon memorabilia that was fake, and Larry Warren was behind it. And there's been several things since. Even Peter Robbins became a victim because he gave Larry Warren a flyer, because his sister was known as Helen Wills, and that flyer was completely empty when he gave it to Larry Warren. Later on, it appeared on an auction site with her signature on it and several others, famous signatures. And that was when Peter became aware that Larry Warren was forging lots of memorabilia for, which
Peter was the guy that wrote the book.
Yeah, Peter Robbins. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So how to go back to my previous question? How did he kind of take, this?
Right.
This kind of
he took it very badly, actually, because we were actually presenting him with the evidence that Larry Warren was basically lying through a lot of stuff. He took it badly because he felt that he should have took it on himself to have actually verified much of what Warren had told him for the book. And he felt very guilty. He felt very let down. He felt very upset. I actually was speaking to him quite a bit before he actually came out publicly, and basically disassociated himself from Warren. I was trying to encourage him that he should do this. He should come out, and never thinking that he would. I thought perhaps he's just going to leave it and just quietly fade away and go away and everything, but eventually I think Peter had so much anger and frustration in him, he actually came out and made an epic statement, and it is quite an epic statement. I think it was about 2017 he made this statement.
And is that easy? Is that easy for people to find, that statement?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to Peter Robbins, that's right, I've got a piece of paper in front of me. It was actually 13th of June 2017. Peter Robbins' statement regarding the Larry Warren deception. Now, it's actually almost a book, this statement that you make, or a thin book, because he actually cites much of the evidence that we gave him, which he then investigated for himself to see that we were telling him, the truth and things that he could check himself. But if you go to Peter Robbins' website, you can actually see this for yourself, this statement. Maybe I could send you a link or something to it. I don't know if it's...
Yeah, if you send me a link, and then I'll be sure to put it in the description of the podcast. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because I think people will actually get I mean, I'm trying to sort of tell you all this in sort of just about, the hour. It's impossible, really.
No, of course. I mean,
but
I
really,
understand. Yeah.
I think anyone that really wants to understand why that split happened needs to read this statement. Yeah, so that was that. I mean, and Peter Robbins was, I think even now he still feels very guilty, very let down, very upset about the whole thing. And he apologised to people like Colonel Holt for writing the book that he wrote about Colonel Holt Goes to Woodbridge. He withdrew it from Sal also. He also withdrew another thing called Deliberate Deception, which he'd written about Nick Pope. Because the Nick Pope book with John Burrows and Jim Penniston was called, I can't think what it was called now. Anyway, it's a Nick Pope Rendlesham book anyway. He apologised to Nick about it, withdrew that particular, that was actually a 7-parter, I think, which was presented with Phenomena magazine. Okay. That was withdrawn. And then also he requested that Left at Eastgate be withdrawn.
Yeah.
Now, Larry Warren comes out about a month later saying that he wanted it withdrawn as well. Now, the only reason he wanted it be withdrawn because it had already been suspended anyway.
Yeah, of course.
And it was suspended under license to investigate.
It's kind of like quitting your job after you've.
It's basically saying. Yeah, it's basically saying, I don't want Peter Robbins to get
have the final say.
To have a final say. But I think there was a bit of other skullduggery going on behind the scenes because they were going to relaunch the Larry Warren story in the film, which you mentioned earlier.
April Green, yeah.
April Green, which I don't really like to mention because there's a few problems with that as well.
No, I mean, but I will mention it. So just for the listener, so there's an upcoming film. I'm not sure when it's due to be released. I mean, feel free to put in there.
Well,
David.
It's about a year behind release already because of problems.
Because of problems, yeah. Okay. So this film basically is based around. It's a documentary type film, so it's not a Hollywood type film, and it's based around the incident, the Rendlesham Forest Incident. Now, a lot of people think that this is just. Yeah. A lot of people think this is the Larry Warren story rebranded.
Oh, yeah. I mean, actually, when they first introduced this film, it was going to be the Larry Warren story again, basically. Yeah. Starring Larry Warren. But I think since they've they've actually tried to expand it to bring in other people,
which it should do. I mean, any unbiased documentary, whether it be on UFOs or ghosts or anything like that, should always have both sides of the story and multiple witness accounts to try and give a fair account of what actually happened. Because even from a ghost hunting perspective, and I'm sure you've been on ghost hunt yourself. Me and Ben have been stood in a room together, and we're both experiencing things. We're experiencing different things, and I see something that he might not see. And then the next day when we talk about it, it's amazing how our perspectives have changed. And I will say, I remember that. And he might say, I don't remember that. And there's no lies involved. There's no purposeful deceit. It's just how we remember things.
Yeah. But there is, as I say, as far as this film is concerned, a very important factor is that none of the real actual witnesses wanted anything to do with it. Colonel Holt wanted nothing to do with it. John Burrows wanted nothing to do with it. Jim Penniston wanted nothing to do with it. Even Nick Pope wanted nothing to do with it. That says a lot because it was actually going to be the Larry Warren story.
Yeah.
Which is basically a yarn that should have been proven to be untrue.
So now that they're trying to broaden the documentary, and try and look at other angles, are these other people now interested in being involved, or is it just gone too far?
No, it's gone too far.
It's just gone too far.
There's actually other people that they've brought into it, which are saying they had incidents as well, which were separate to the RFI. But if you watch a trailer, they're actually showing you a trailer and trying to make it look like these people are actually involved in the RFI. There's a Michael Stacey Smith, who I was going to have on my show. I asked him twice to come on my show because he was saying that his event was separate to the RFI, but he tells a story about he was on guard duty with an M60 machine gun. Now, I don't know if you know what an M60 machine gun is.
I don't, unfortunately.
Well, you've seen the one where Rambo picks it up with one arm and it's got all the bullets hanging over his shoulder and that type of thing.
Okay.
Well, it's a heavy duty attack defense weapon when you're under heavy attack.
It's not something you stand on guard duty with.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
You'd have
now he reckons he had it locked and loaded, ready to fire, and it had 500 rounds. Now, can you imagine a guard, being on guard duty, and you've got 500 rounds ready to fire into British territory? Now, This is all going to be in the film, into British territory, because he sees a light in the forest.
Yeah.
Now, that could be somebody just wandering about in the woods with a torch, and yet he's ready to open fire on them. It's such a, honestly.
Yeah, but I mean, again, this is just doesn't matter what field of investigations you're in. What you've just said there is just critical thinking. You've heard somebody say something, and common sense. You think that doesn't sound right.
Oh, I actually backed that up. I actually went to the Cold War Museum, which is in Bentwaters. I asked a question to the let's call him the expert that's there. He wears a uniform and everything, and he knows basically everything that goes on, went on the history of Bentwaters. Now I asked him, I said, now would anyone be on guard duty with an M60 in a foxhole? And I got a raised eyebrows. He went like that. I said, right, thank you. Just answer my question.
Yeah.
Now, then the question was asked of Colonel Holt also. He also said, no, not at all. There's a Donald Leisure who issued the weapons. He said, no M60s would have been issued. Jim Penniston said the same thing. He says he issued all the basically the I don't know, what do you call it? The descriptions of how they should operate. I did give it a name. I can't think what it was called, but how the base operates for like security. He says that no M60 was issued. So there you go. So what they're using in the film is basically BS again.
Yeah.
And they've got another supposed witness who left in early December, just before Larry Warren joined or joined the base. Who says she had her own experience. Now they're blending all that in to try and make it look like it's all part of the RFI, which obviously it isn't.
No.
So no actual witnesses that were involved in the RFI are actually involved in the film. So that's kind. So how you can actually make it, and call it Capel Green, and and also when Colonel Holt was here, he actually made a couple of calls to solicitors while he was here, because he was trying to find out how he stood with using because he'd already warned the film company not to use his name, likeness, or memo or tape or anything in the film. And the legal team here, or the solicitors here, told him that he has got a case, but he would probably be better off having a legal team in the States sending letters and just to to fire warning shots over their bow sort of thing. So where it's going to go from there, I don't know. So and I understand that Nick Pope has done the same, and I understand that Jim Penniston's done the same. John Burrows, I'm not sure what he's done, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's not going to go down the same road as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, we'll probably start wrapping it up there, because we're probably hitting the hour mark. I mean, I'm
sorry for your listeners there. I've rambled on a bit, but it's actually it's not an easy story to tell.
It's not. I mean, I guess if you want to tell us where people can contact you, because I bet there's going to be a bunch of listeners who might want to read that, that statement that was put out, or they might want to contact you if they want any more details about this whole incident. So if you want to give people the best way to contact you.
Okay, right. Well, I don't know if anyone's in. I've got my own radio show called Paranormal Dimensions, and it's on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Okay, my show goes out on Monday nights. I've already had a few shows with Colonel Holt, Jim Penniston, etc. If you want my email address, it's David Young 2QN at yahoo.co.uk. And if anyone wants to drop me a line, then and ask me some more information, or please come and visit my Paranormal Dimensions site on Facebook, or you can find me as David Young on Facebook. Also linked to that. Don't know what else I can tell you, really.
No, that's brilliant. I mean, I'll make sure that I put all these links and email addresses in the description.
I will send you that Peter Robbins link as well, so you can.
Yeah, definitely. And like I say, any of our listeners that want to get any more info, because as you've rightly said, it's a huge topic of debate.
It is huge. I've actually had Peter Robbins on my show as well.
I've actually listened to that one, and that was quite an interesting podcast. That. But yeah, I mean, I guess it just remains to say thank you very much, David, for coming on the show. I mean, it's been brilliant.
It's been
Thank
fascinating.
You for inviting me.
The whole history of it and everything.
Yeah. But as I say, I'm sorry I went on a bit. Anyone listening, but
I'm sure they'll appreciate it. We don't need to say again. It's a fascinating subject, and one we could talk about for hours. And who knows, maybe we'll get you back on for a Rendlesham Part 2.
Yeah, always will.
That'd be
I mean,
good.
the story is ever evolving anyway, so.
It is. I mean, it seems to be. And that's the thing. If new evidence comes to light, then you can't choose to ignore it because it doesn't fit in with the belief that you currently have. You have to look at the evidence, and you have to be prepared to change the direction of your beliefs.
Absolutely, but some don't.
No, some don't, and we know that from the ghost world. Some don't, and unfortunately, that's what holds back the field in general in terms of research and evidence. But yeah, brilliant. So thank you very much, David. Take care.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, everybody out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
So there was our interview with David Young. Very interesting topic. Obviously, a lot of controversy around that.
Yeah.
That's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I mean, on the face of it, that the incident itself is fascinating. It's a great historical moment in ufology.
Yeah.
Particularly for the UK, because you always hear about Roswell. You always hear about these things happening all over the world. Yeah. And as a UK resident, I suppose it sounds a bit strange, but it's quite nice for something to happen on our own soil.
Yeah, I guess so.
What interested me was the nuclear aspect that he spoke of.
Yes.
Because you always hear about UFOs that are around nuclear shelters.
But he also said as well that when they went out to investigate, they took a Geiger counter.
Yes.
And that obviously takes radiation.
Yeah, because they were obviously suspecting at the time that it could be something nuclear based. Yeah. But you do hear a lot of UFO incidents, UFO reports that are around nuclear plants and things like that. I think Fukushima, when that kind of went up, I'm sure there was a spark in UFO reports in that area. Just something to think about. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting subject, and it does get a little bit heated. Obviously, not during the interview. David was fine, but if you do follow this ongoing debate, I guess you could call it, it does get a little bit heated from time to time, and people, just trying to get to the truth, really. And that's all we're trying to do. So hopefully you enjoyed that interview with David. And if you do have any questions or any, you want to delve a little bit deeper into the subject, do follow the links that David gave you. I'll put them in the podcast description. Contact him. He's more than happy for you to contact him, and he'll answer any questions that you've got or point you in the right direction to someone that can answer those questions. We'll talk about the investigation now for what we did. So this was just me, actually. Ben, you didn't come.
No, I didn't make this one.
Amateur. The part-timer. So, we did part 3 over the local pub. So we've kept you up to date with recent investigations that we've done there. And again, it proved interesting. Again, there were different aspects of evidence that we were capturing. We went into the cellar, which has proved a hive of activity.
Yeah, we've already seen that.
Yeah, and we've had the moving barrels, we've had my name being called, we've had whistles. This time we had an audible groan, and it happened literally in the first 10-20 seconds of starting the investigation. So we went down into the cellar, and the lights were off. We all got as comfortable as you can get sitting on barrels of beer. And we started calling out. And I said, is there anyone there? Would you like to make yourself be known? And I'm going to do this now, and I might embarrass myself. But what we heard back is what sounded like that. And we all kind of jumped up. Did you hear that? And, so I've turned the torch, tried to ask you, was that any of you? And there was only like 5-6 of us. And we were all close together. And, you fingers with a paranormal investigation, you have to trust the people that you're with.
Of course, yeah.
And, I trust these people. And it was a weird noise to make if it was one of them, So, not a clue what it was, but it was certainly an interesting start. We then had flashes of light in the cellar. We had people being touched and poked. And then we were sat up towards the top end of the cellar, which is where the metal shutters are in the ceiling of the cellar, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's where the barrels.
Where they put the barrels down into the cellar.
That rattled, like really loud, and I mean, I had to apologise to the guy next to me. I grabbed his arm. That's Nigel. I grabbed Nigel's arm because it did shock me. We thought, what the hell was that? And it turns out that a car had pulled onto the car park
really?
and driven over the gate in the floor. And that's what we heard. And I tell you, when you were in the moment, it really scared you. And it couldn't have been at a more pivotal time. You know, is there anyone want to make a noise? And then bang, and we jumped up out of our seats.
But at least you know what it was.
We know what it was. Yeah. You know, the first thing on my mind was, that's not a ghost. I know that's quite bad from a ghost investigator, but the first thing on my mind was, that's not a ghost. So
there's certain things on when you go on these investigations that you tend to learn. Certain things could be this, and then there's other things that you just go, oh, that wasn't.
Yeah, you're right.
Just know.
Yeah. So the first thing I said was, it's someone messing around. Someone's up there.
Yeah.
You know, they know what we're doing, and they're giving it a shake. So I went up, and as soon as I got into the bar area where the other team were, one of them said, I bet that scared you, that car driving on. And straight away, I knew it. Luckily, the next day, the landlord reviewed the CCTV. We got the time. It was 12 minutes past 1. And he texted me to confirm it was indeed a car pulling on and then pulling straight back off the drive. So what the car was doing is a different story. But yeah, it certainly scared us. But yeah, you're right, we debunked it. We had the spirit board was going mad again, and but again, it wasn't so mad where it has been in the corner of the bar.
Oh yeah.
In the ladies' toilets where it was really kicking off last time. This time it was in the new extension. So there's the extension of the pub that's about 1970s, and it was an 18-year-old who was apparently with or attached to or knew this guy called Nigel who'd come with us. Died when he was 18. Said it was 1980, I think, if I remember rightly. He thought it was 1980. Nigel couldn't really put anything together really to come up with anything there, but interesting anyway. I mean, it was flying around the board. So yeah, again, you know, we had some interesting feedback, some interesting things happen. Yeah, I mean, we'll go there again. We'll do.
Yeah, it always does seem very active, that place.
It does.
There's always something,
but never the same.
No.
It moves from room to room every time we go. You know, we'll be on the car park next doing a spirit board. You know.
Yeah.
So they'll you know we'll keep you posted on that, because there's definitely a part 4 going to happen. For those that don't know, I've got a child on the way. At the time of recording this, which is the 18th of September, he's due tomorrow. So I don't think he will come. I think he's going to be late. I think he's comfortable where he is. Why would you come out, you know, if you're nice and comfy?
But on the other hand, if you don't hear from us for a couple of weeks, there's a reason.
There's a reason. Yeah, I'll be sure to keep you posted, and Ben will keep you posted on Facebook if there's a delay in an output, simply because I'm up to my elbows in nappies or something like that. So yeah, is there anything you want to add, Ben? Or
no? I think it was very good.
Yep, excellent. So, as always, thank you for listening. Please share the podcast. We are gaining quite a following now. I know, Ben, you're impressed with our viewing figures and our listening figures. So, please keep it going. Please keep sharing it. And thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.